What is up, wrestling fans? Welcome to episode number 633 of the Smark Moment Smack Talk podcast, hot tags of the week. We're going to be breaking down everything that happened in the world of pro wrestling that we feel like talking about, from the TV stuff, the rumors, the news, the gossip, the people leaving companies, people joining companies, the injury reports, and so on and so forth. I'm your host, as always, Tony Mango, joined as always by Callum Wiggins.
Hi.
And Robert A. Felice.
Hey.
And as always, we want you to tell us what you have to say about these topics that we are going to be talking about too. So by all means, make sure that you chime in with your thoughts on any different platform that you have on here. If you're on YouTube, it's the easiest thing possible. You got the comment section below. And while you're over there, make sure you hit all the good buttons that are on there, the like button, the share button, double check that you are subscribed, and also click on that little notification bell. Get your email alerts set up for when we go live for certain things, like the post show at the end of the month with the, it's coming around. Actually, it's almost like next week or something, right? Yeah. Man.
It's not almost next week. It is next week.
Well, I mean, it's Friday today, so I'm thinking to myself, it's not quite a week from now, but yeah. Snuck up on us. I'm going to have a lot of articles I'm going to have to do that I forgot to do yet. We got all that coming up, of course. And if you want to go back and check out the most recent Darkcast, and you want to check out a previous Royal Rumble, we did the 1994, we did the 2014, but we also have the 2004 one over there on the channel membership and the Patreon. So if you want to subscribe on those, obviously that stuff's greatly appreciated. Shout out to Daniel, by the way, the newest member of the Darkcast here from today at like 10 in the morning or something. I got that email or whatever. Awesome for you doing that, Daniel. Thank you very much.
Okay,
and
go Daniel.
The Redbubble and TeePublic stuff, I still haven't figured out an alternative to them. I'm always putting that on the back burner just because it's a lot of effort to re-upload all that stuff. But, at some point, I'm going to take them off of there because screw them for taking all the money that they do out. But if you want to pick up anything there while you can, Redbubble and TeePublic is where you can find that stuff for all the merch options. And of course, if you click on that little thanks button, it's another means to help us out with a little spare change that you got our way. So thank you to anybody who does that in any means that you do, including just listening to this and hitting the like button. All that stuff's greatly, greatly appreciated. So as you tuned in for this episode, let's start talking about the stuff on this episode. We have, as Callum was referring to it earlier, before we got started, a spicy episode today of the hot tags.
Yeah, we do.
Some pretty interesting topics here. And, on a normal week, we might have one or two of those. We have a lot, have pretty big things switching around with contracts and people moving between companies and all. Unfortunately, some injuries to talk about. On a normal week that would have been a little bit more boring, we would probably dive deeper into these trademark names and stuff that people are switching up in NXT, but they're all pretty just basic. So our thoughts are pretty much, it's a name, who cares? But, new names happen all the time. And one new name to talk about is Ash by Elegance. Because Dana Brooke and Nic Nemeth, Dolph Ziggler, for anybody who doesn't know his real name, have joined the TNA roster. And of course, Nemeth is a part of the New Japan side of things now too. We saw that at Wrestle Kingdom. So he's kind of pulling double duty. Dana Brooke, seemingly just in TNA, but she might have a deal that would allow her to work elsewhere if other parties were interested, and if she was. I'm excited in the sense that, of course, I don't watch TNA, but I like the idea that people can go and, kind of freshen things up a little bit. And these two seem like they could be good fits for that. I can't say I'm excited about this Ash by Elegance thing, though. Feels a little bit like an even lesser version of the Tony Storm character that I'm not a big fan of.
I don't know why people keep going there, but
it's the glamorous, like, starlet kind of vibe. So, she might not do things. She certainly shouldn't do things exactly like that. If she starts having like the black and white filter and everything, though, she's just biting off of it. But it gives me similar vibes, and it's not exactly what I would have wanted. But then again, I'm not watching it, so I'm not as invested. How you guys feeling about these two joining TNA?
Before you go any further, was there a specific something you wanted from Brooke outside of WWE?
Not necessarily.
I didn't think.
But just because I don't have an idea in mind doesn't mean I can't reject other ideas.
Yeah, I mean, okay.
Yeah, it's the type of thing somebody says, "What do you want for dinner?" And you're like, "I don't know." And then they go, "Well, what about I don't know, burgers?" And you're like, "I don't feel like eating a burger." And then you're like, "You just said you don't know." And you go, "Yeah, but I don't want a burger." Yeah. By the way, I'd be down for a burger tonight. I don't know.
It should be Elegance by Ash, especially when you see that she's doing like the perfume commercial gimmick, and it's like, you're not Ash by Elegance, because that would make, you're the brand, so the brand should be Ash, but whatever. I'm not gonna get bogged down in semantics. It's cool that she's trying something new. I definitely didn't think that she'd be popping up anywhere anytime soon, so I'm excited for her to do that. And quite frankly, WWE had a very specific ceiling for her, so if she can find herself outside of that, I think of like EC3, right? Derek Bateman wasn't really much of anything, but EC3 ended up becoming such a strong character that eventually WWE hired him back to be EC3, and then he kind of flew off the handle, but that's okay, because, you know, he at least got to do something. I'm excited for this run. Ziggler, Nic Nemeth, this feels like it should have happened 10 years ago. I mean, honestly, in terms of where the TNA brand is and where Nic Nemeth is as a performer, it's really serendipitous, but this should have happened a long time ago. And I'm excited to see what he can do, not only there, but in New Japan. And he's going to fight Matt Cardona in GCW on February 3rd, I believe. And I'm excited to see what they do with that.
Yeah, I think this is it's a good platform for both those two to land. There's a bit of a vibrancy and a buzz about TNA now that the old brand has been restored, and so it's a good place for them to get some more eyeballs back on them and to try something a little bit different. With Nic Nemeth, it's more of a case of trying to prove that he's still got that fire in desire. God, like go back to the Mandy Rose and Sonya Deville. Basically, the last prominent thing that he really did in WWE, it feels like. But that's still that passion and that drive to be the best, and he's clearly going straight into the main event scene of TNA, which is fair. He's their big marquee signing, and I'm impressed with the fact that he is doing that. He's going to TNA. He's doing things with GCW. He's booked for gigs in like Puerto Rico and in Australia as well. So he's not just resting on his laurels and waiting for just the few people to stump up like huge sums of money for him to come in. He's wanting to go out there and work, and so yeah, good for him. Ash by Elegance, I think it's got kind of the jury's out on this one. I think there's like this legion of fans that she had mainly through X, but you know, whether they're actually real people or just bots, it's hard to really tell. But people that were always talking about that she should be given more opportunities, and she never really got the breaks, that's the hard work that she puts in WWE. So hopefully all those people have followed her over to see what she'll be doing in Impact Wrestling, and we'll see if, given more exposure and more spotlight, that whether she can deliver. But obviously this is a good opportunity, for a good platform for her to do so. So let's see if she can prove all the doubters she had wrong.
Hopefully so. You know, I mean, obviously the better that everybody has going on, the better for everybody. Like there's no positive to a negative, but my initial reaction is just sort of, you know, I thought a similar thing to what Rob said. I was like, shouldn't it be Elegance by Ash? And then it was like, well, I mean, that it's a nitpicky thing, but then I'm like, this isn't making me want to tune in anymore. But, you know, give it a shot and see what happens. How long do you guys think it's going to take before they win the titles?
I think it's cool that, you know, they're trying characters, because Dana Brooke, well, like, it didn't have a character really. She was just, hey, I'm Dana Brooke.
She had a couple of different characters, but they were all shit. It was like she was an accountant for like a couple of weeks with Titus Worldwide and
I have, you know,
statistician. That's what it was. And then she had that's not really a character, but for like about like a month, she was teaming with Mandy, and it was the whole idea of them being like muscular, hot blonde girl
Kind of.
tag team. I forget what they call themselves. It was like, it's probably somewhere on Smark at the moment. But yeah, she hasn't had much of a character, so it's trying something a little bit different. And yeah.
I would strap Ziggler immediately. Obviously, like he ain't getting any younger. We don't need another Moose reign. Put it on Nic Nemeth and let him run wild. I think that they messed up by not strapping Cardona when he was there, because he went on to just be the talk of the town in 2021, 2022. So I thought that was a mistake. So hopefully, Nic Nemeth really knocks it out of the park and they can have a top star there. Ash by Elegance, I'm not so sure, because I think they have a stacked women's division, as they always have with their knockouts, and maybe it's going to take a little bit longer, but maybe by Slammiversary, which is July. Ziggler, I'd put it on immediately, and I'm going to call him Ziggler until...
Yeah, he's going to be Ziggler pretty much forever. And it's going to be hard to not call her Dana Brooke.
By the way, the former Zigzag is now called the Danger Zone, which is a better name than the Knick Knack, so I think we won that.
Well, he couldn't call it the Knick Knack because that's not really much of a patty whack type of move.
Are you saying that you would want to give that dog a bone?
You talking about Ash by Elegance? It's an obvious joke. I had to make it. Yeah, so I mean that was the big hard to kill reveal. Was Ziggler coming out at the end there and all. Anything else from Hard to Kill you guys feel like talking about? I mean, I know that like there were some title changes and all, but we sort of talked ahead of time about the idea that Naomi would be dropping the belt. And yes, she's still Naomi to me. And maybe she is going to be ready in time for the Royal Rumble. Maybe not, based off of some tapings and some other things.
The taping in Orlando is today and tomorrow.
Oh, so she might be good then. Yeah.
I mean,
which, by the way, I gotta get on that this weekend. I guess that the Royal Rumble predictions contest thing. I'll publish that as soon as I can. I'll probably publish it by the time that it's this podcast is up on there. But if you're interested in putting up your betting odds when it comes to thinking that she will be in the Royal Rumble and she'll be like number 8 or whatever it might be, we'll have that thing up for the course of the next week. Yeah, other like the Crazy Steve won that digital media championship, so on and so forth.
I thought the saddest thing about that was somebody had tweeted, "I can't take TNA seriously. Tommy Dreamer is a champion there," and then he DM'd them, "I lost. You can take them seriously now."
That's pretty sad.
Dreamer's harmless in my eyes. Yeah, that was good. I thought the X Division title match with Sabin and Vikingo and Kushida was a lot of fun. I thought Hammerstone and Alexander really brought it. I thought Alexander and Ospreay on the subsequent episode of TNA Impact brought it. It was a really strong showing for TNA. I thought it was good stuff all around. Oh, and Top Dollar is feuding with Joe Hendry there, so there's that.
I did see that little video where he's making fun of him falling and all. That's kind of funny. Anything on your end about the Hard to Kill stuff, Callum?
I haven't seen Hard to Kill, so I won't be able to comment on it.
Do you watch Battle in the Valley?
Yes, I did, yeah.
Correct. So we could switch on over to that because that's got a couple different things in a very similar fashion to Hard to Kill, where some people are popping up there that hadn't been in the company before. You got some title situations that are pretty interesting. And then, of course, I'm sure that there's elements to this that are completely lost on me that are more interesting too. But what are your big takeaways when it comes to this?
So I didn't watch or didn't really pay a huge amount of attention to most of the early matches because they didn't really matter too much, apart from the opener, which was notable for one particular reason, which is not the victory for Fred Rosser, Jacob Fatu, and Shota Umino over Team Filthy, But it was what happened afterwards, which was Shota Umino was giving some high fives to fans around ringside, and then one of them in the mask jumped him. And the security got involved because, and at least what is being reported, security had no idea who this was and were not smartened up to the idea that this was Jack Perry, revealing the mask, attacking Shota Umino, and then coming out into the ring and revealing an AEW contract, which he promptly tore up. And then yeah, that's probably the most noteworthy thing from the entire show.
And then he put on an armband that read Scapegoat.
Oh yeah, put the armband that said Scapegoat as well. So I guess this is his new gimmick. I presume that this is a signal of obviously the working relationship between New Japan and AEW is that Jack Perry is now going to apply a new character, still probably employed by AEW, to be in New Japan for a while instead, and I guess rehabilitate and create a new character off the basis of the fact that he was in kayfabe let go by AEW due to his involvement in the CM Punk incident. So that's an interesting way. I'm certainly more in favour of this than him being the devil, which was a lot of people's speculation. So this could be. I haven't been super enamored with the heel turn so far, so this could be a new, interesting direction. And let's face it, especially with other news that we're talking about later on, New Japan could use all this star power they can get.
Mm-hmm.
I'm for those of you that are not privy to our conversations, I'm currently sharing with the guys what I think is a visual illustration of the current relationship between AEW and New Japan, because let me tell you something, I was excited for this. And I thought it was great for Jack Perry. By the way, should never shave. He looks like so much older and so much more serious with a beard. I know beards in general are a little played out, but he looks pretty good with that. This would be a lot more effective to me if Punk actually got fired. And, or if he didn't get fired, I should say. Because how are you the scapegoat when the other guy got so fired that he's already about to main event WrestleMania? What are you the scapegoat for exactly?
Yeah.
I guess the way the scapegoat thing approaches is that he was also punished for what, at least by a lot of the reports that come out, was essentially just Punk going after him. And so the fact that he was also punished and also... and based on this, the story is going to be that he was kicked out of AEW, because that is the angle they're taking. The angle they're taking is that he either left or he was fired from AEW as a result of this. So I think that as I say, I'm interested to see what direction that takes him in New Japan, because he's clearly entering a feud, at least initially, with Shota Umino, who's one of the new hot prospects in New Japan. So yeah, I think this is a good move for him.
The good thing about that is that puts him in Moxley's pathway and allows for a potential story to develop there. But I think he's going to thrive. He had to get away from AEW because there was nothing going on there. He turned heel. They gave him a classical piece as entrance music, but they didn't really do anything with it. And now we get to see what Jack Perry can actually do outside of the nonverbal Tarzan Jungle Boy gimmick and the Jack Perry that we would later see develop in AEW.
There's other stuff from Battle in the Valley that was notable. As I expected, Julia retained the New Japan Strong Women's title over Trish Adora. So there's still very much nothing's really changed. She's still expected to go to WWE. There's a report that went out sometime this week or early last week about how AEW had not made any play for Julia because for some reason Tony Khan or people behind the scenes in AEW don't rate her significantly highly. So I think it's pretty much a one-horse race about who signs her. The tag team match, Jeff Cobb was Matt Riddle's mystery tag team partner, and they defeated the Mighty Don't Kneel in their match. It interesting result was Eddie Kingston versus Gabe Kidd for the AEW Triple Crown, Continental Crown, with ended in a double count out, with a giant brawl taking place between like Eddie Kingston and other members of Bullet Club. So presumably Gabe Kidd is going to get another opportunity at some point, and that might happen in New Japan, in another, maybe a more like New Japan crowd, because I don't imagine Gabe Kidd is going to AEW off the back of this. But I don't know, strange things happened.
His deal is coming up too, right? Or all the War Dogs deals coming up?
Yeah, but then as I say, we'll get to it when we get to it, but I doubt that that's the move that's going to be made. And then there were two awesome matches at the end of it with Jon Moxley and Shingo Takagi in an absolutely excellent no disqualification match, with Moxley getting the victory, as would be anticipated. And then one of the, well, I guess we'll move on to this now. So the final match was Kazuchika Okada defeating Will Ospreay in a singles match, which was supposed to be Will Ospreay's his final singles match and swan song from New Japan Pro Wrestling. Little did we know that a few days later it would come out that this won't be Okada's final match in New Japan Pro Wrestling, but it will be one of the final matches. And we could maybe be seeing this match somewhere down the road in an AEW ring, but we'll come cross that bridge when it comes to it. But yeah, so it was a very good show, like some really, really good matches on this, and it was a very noteworthy show for probably reasons that New Japan wish it wasn't for. So, but yeah. Should we just get into that topic now, because it's big enough?
Yep.
I think Okada, that's the biggest story of the week, quite frankly.
Yeah, I mean, it's a surprise to me, honestly, because we were talking about this, obviously, over the past few weeks, that there had been rumblings that Okada might want to leave, and, you know, the ins and outs of that. And you hear a lot of chatter about that with a lot of people over time that ends up not being true, or it ends up being blown out of proportion, or the amount of times we had heard, for instance, like Randy Orton might leave and go to AEW, and then it was like, yeah, he was never interested. It was just a ploy to get more money. We had talked about it somewhat recently, about the idea that, yeah, that's probably what's happening with Okada. He's probably just renegotiating his contract, and he's interested in hearing what everybody else has to offer, but he'll stay in New Japan. And for it to now be like, no, he's gone. It's just a matter of where else is he going to go next, because he's not retiring. He's, you know, going to be going to another company. You got to assume, of course, that he would be leaning more towards AEW or WWE rather than TNA. He did just pop up for them, though, so it's not like it's entirely outside of the realm of possibility. But given the options, every single time that somebody has had a working relationship with AEW, they've gone to AEW. I don't remember any instance where somebody opted to go to WWE in this kind of environment, because WWE's only had people like her name was, I think, Elena Black before she became Cora Jade, and like Fallon Henley had been there in, you know, AEW dark matches for Priscilla Kelly. Like the dark match people, they eventually came to WWE because they weren't getting contracts from AEW. Batty Rankowski just recently, you know, signed to WWE. Shout out to NXT this week. Actually did a pretty good job. We'll talk about that. But the people like Will Ospreay and, you know, Jay White and all the people that are like the quote unquote big name gets that you can potentially sign, if they've worked with AEW before and they've wrestled at Forbidden Door, or they've wrestled at some, you know, guest spot on Dynamite, they always end up in AEW. So my brain just instinctively goes, oh, okay, well, Okada's going to get a huge money offer from Tony Khan. He is going to work with the same group of people that he's been working with, and that's it. But it's not like it's a guarantee. And if WWE is interested in them enough, you know, maybe they end up making enough of an offer that we could see Okada wrestle at WrestleMania.
I saw, I believe it was Jeremy Lambert put out the absolutely hilarious idea of Cody doesn't win the Rumble. Cody has nothing going into WrestleMania. and then gets informed by Triple H that he has a mystery opponent,
Yeah.
and it's just Okada, and Okada beats him in 3 straight pay-per-views.
I heard one person put out there, what if Okada is going to go up against Gunther? Which I still think it's just going to be Brock Lesnar, but like,
I mean, yes,
I'd be interested. You know, people of course are talking about like fantasy matches on both sides. You know, Okada versus AJ Styles to redo that feud. Okada up against, you know, the handful of talent from AEW, of course, and I'm interested. That's for sure.
I mean, I think it's going to be AEW, you know, but it's kind of like, looking back on it now, have they been keeping Shinsuke strong so that he can tell his good buddy Okada, like, hey, come have fun, you know? Okada, I saw someone say, why would you want this for him? Look at Tozawa, and somebody replied, somebody tell this person how tall Okada is, because Okada's a decently sized dude. He could fit in the WWE main event scene from a poster perspective. And there's quite a few matches I'd like to see him have there. But ultimately, I do think it's going to be AEW, and I do think if you think about the trade-off of like, okay, we couldn't make it work with Punk, but we have Ospreay and Edge and Okada and Diana and maybe Sasha Banks too. Like, this could be a banner year for AEW in terms of pickups if they do Okada, and I assume that they will.
Which also, like, for anybody that would be thinking he's going to fall into the Tozawa or Funaki or, you know, Yoshitatsu type route, not only is the size something that is a big factor, it's also we're more in a Triple H regime now than in the prior years. And on top of that, there's just a level of star power. Like, Shinsuke Nakamura came into NXT as a big deal. And even though they screwed things up eventually with him and they ended up not having him, you know, win the Royal Rumble and win at WrestleMania, or
but his first year on the main roster, he did win the Royal Rumble.
He won the Royal Rumble and fought for the title at WrestleMania, and he's won multiple mid-card titles. They push him back up here and there, and I think that if Okada were to come to WWE, I think he'd be totally safe. Like, they would put him on the main roster. They wouldn't do the whole NXT thing. He'd be feuding with maybe like a Nakamura to start off with, you know, just to kind of get his feet wet. And they'd have him in matches against Ricochet, and they'd have him in matches against, you know, Drew McIntyre down the road and whatever. Like, he'd be treated
Randy,
like
that's a match I want to see Randy and.
Yeah, they'd give him a decent spot. They wouldn't just saddle him with some stupid gimmick and, you know, job him out on main event or something. But I'm definitely thinking he's more heading towards AEW, just because it's too hard to look at the track record and then just assume he's going to go, nah, I think I'm going to go to WWE. But then again, you know, I mean, some people, they want to check off wrestling at WrestleMania, and you can't do that in AEW. Just as much as you might want to keep wrestling at whatever that level is that AEW has more than WWE has, it depends on what his priority is. If it's just pure money, then it depends on who offers him the most amount of money and the most amount of free time and the most amount of, you know, the easy travel or, you know, any of those factors. And if it's just a matter of I want to wrestle at WrestleMania, then he's got to go to WWE. If he just wants to wrestle with some friends of his, he's probably got more in AEW. I know Callum wants him in AEW.
Actually, I don't.
Really?
Whoa, hey, whoa.
And before this point as well, I don't want him in WWE either.
Huh.
Weird.
I'm
You want him
really,
in NWA? Okay, it's been said.
I'm really frustrated that it's all come to this. First of all, I wanted to at least talk about the fact that now that we know he's going, I do agree that AEW is most likely destination. By all counts, with the Wrestling Observer newsletter reporting this, they're saying that he's developed a strong friendship with Bryan Danielson off the back of their couple of matches they've had. He's good friends with Kenny Omega and the Young Bucks. He's been to AEW beforehand. He's been on television there. He knows how the system works. By all accounts, Tony Khan is willing to let him continue to live in Japan if he wants to. and just bring him in as and when he needs to. So to try and accommodate his lifestyle in the same way that he's done with Will Ospreay, that Ospreay can continue to live in the UK and just fly in and out as and when he's required to do so. Whereas obviously if he were to go to WWE, things have changed from a creative perspective. I certainly do not agree with people's mindset of that he would be plunged into the Japanese stereotype that persisted decades ago because of what we have seen with both Shinsuke Nakamura and Damage Control being like one of the most featured acts on SmackDown. It's clearly being non-American is not the hindrance it once was on someone's career in WWE. So I have no doubt that he would be treated with respect and prominently pushed if he was in WWE in the same way that he would be pushed as a living legend that he frankly is in AEW because of his history there. And yeah, I'd say if he's had good interactions with Tony Khan and he's got friendships over in AEW, the likelihood is that that's probably his destination. Where the perspective that I'm coming from of the frustration is what the absolute fuck is happening to New Japan Pro Wrestling.
Right.
Like that is the big sticking point. It's the one that we wouldn't take the most obvious perspective from as fans of most prominently both WWE and AEW as the things that we cover the most ardently. Of course, we don't see Okada wrestle in one of these two promotions from just a pure fan perspective because we're more likely to see them. Tony doesn't watch New Japan. I watch New Japan like fairly regularly, but not as often as I used to. Rob's probably in the same boat as me in that respect.
And of course, it's matches we haven't seen before. So, are you more interested in watching Okada go up against Tanahashi another 6 times this year, or are you interested in him fighting people like I don't know, like Christian Cage or Samoa Joe or whoever on the WWE front? Yeah.
But the main aspect of this is just how poorly this has all been handled by New Japan and what it kind of says about the state of the promotion right now. When your top star, your biggest star, you don't push the boat out to keep him. I'm not saying that maybe Okada was just completely done with New Japan and said he needs to try something else. So I can't say that they probably didn't make a play to keep him, but it does say something when what is this kind of like statement that it puts out there to the rest of the people on the roster of New Japan that you don't do everything in your power to keep hold of the biggest star that you have, the biggest star that you've had for generations, arguably. And the fact that, even changing the presidency and hand over to Hiroshi Tanahashi away from a guy that's apparent, well, at least reportedly Okada was not on great terms with. He's in good terms with Tanahashi. I mean, Tanahashi's going to be his final singles match. But that's also the other point, is that if for any reason you had reason to suspect that Okada might be leaving at the end of this year, why did you not use his final year to its full potential? The biggest issue is that with New Japan right now is that they're in a very difficult holding period and they've kind of stagnated and frozen in place, and they've got a lot of really interesting young dynamic talent there, but they've been held down and they've been kept in the mid card and the lower reaches of the card in favor of the status quo, pushing guys like Sonata that have been there for ages and kind of giving them their gold watch as a world title reign when realistically they didn't do anything. They weren't stand out enough to deserve it. And continuing with people like Evil towards the top and, still pushing guys like Tanahashi and Naito and people that have just been at the top of the card in New Japan for a decade or longer. And this was an opportunity. Like, if you had any inkling or had the belief that Okada might not sign with New Japan, you could have utilized this year to have him feud and lose to some of these up-and-coming stars in order to propel them to the next level. Like, utilize your top star on his way out in the same way that Ospreay is losing people on the way out of New Japan, and he lost to Josh Alexander in TNA their first show of this past week, just to demonstrate how much he's willing to put the people in the promotions that have given him opportunities and given him like bookings on his way into AEW. So it's just a clear sign of a lack of planning, a lack of like just control at the top, poor management, which is seemingly plaguing a lot of New Japan, poor booking, poor foresight. Clearly, the allure of America and the financial benefits there is too strong for anything that New Japan to compete with. They would be praying that he goes to AEW because that is the only opportunity they'll ever get to have Okada appear on their shows moving forward.
Yeah.
But then there's also the big sticky point here is that we're talking about there's lots of like dynamic new matches, and we think that both AEW and WWE would treat Okada well if he was to go over there, and I have no doubt that would be the case. But the bigger issue is these two companies don't need Okada. New Japan needs Okada. And they will survive and they'll move on and they'll find other people to move forward, but it's becoming a difficult situation where, you know, before AEW came around in the first place, we bemoaned a monopoly in pro wrestling, which was that WWE is the only big name in town, and so eventually all the biggest names of every single other promotion is going to go to WWE. Now there's two, which is better, but it's still not great. Because now, I think we'd all be in agreement, both WWE's and AEW's rosters are incredibly bloated.
Pretty much, yeah.
There is too much talent on both of those rosters, which means that unless you're one of the absolute top names that always feature at the head of the card, whether that is in WWE or Roman Reigns, your Seth Rollins, your Cody Rhodes, and in AEW, your likes of MJF and Chris Jericho and Hangman Page, people of that ilk, then you are kind of, despite your talent and a lot of the young, up-and-coming, exciting names you have in both those promotions, there's always going to be a level of, I guess, inconsistency and inability to make the regular appearances and pick up the regular wins you need to move up the card and elevate your status, because there's just too many people and they need to have TV time. People already bemoan the fact that on like all AEW shows, there's only one women's match typically on every show. Like, is adding Okada to it going to solve that problem? No, of course not. And frankly, adding more women is not going to solve that problem either, because you've arguably got too many women as it is already to even do that stuff, and you've got way too many men to cut out those segments to give more time to the women. And you're just adding more and more and more. And yeah, it is exciting. It is super exciting to hear names like Will Ospreay and Mercedes Moné and Adam Copeland and Kazuchika Okada potentially going to AEW, and also all these people potentially going to WWE as well. But it's now the time. We need number 3 to step up. We need a number 3 to step up and give opportunities to the people that are being underserved by both of these promotions. And hopefully TNA is that, but we can't. But it's hard to trust TNA.
The track record of TNA definitely speaks to not investing too much positivity in there, even though they're on an upward swing right now. But it's like, how long is that going to last?
Yeah. Without knowing the ins and outs, I think we apply Tony's urge to merge. We could somehow merge like TNA and their presentation and MLW and its presentation. I think you'd end up with something that could be a really strong number 3. I think TNA is on its way to doing that right now, but Callum is right. It is concerning that, like, I saw a video. I saw one of the AEW video packages from 2021 where they were spotlighting like Nyla and Private Party and all these people, and I was like, oh, this is just a different company completely, and well, it's cool to see them elevate in terms of, hey, they got Tony Storm and all these people they didn't have before. It does suck for the Nylas and the Private Parties that came here thinking, oh, cool, there's a path for us
now. And obviously all promotions evolve. New talent becomes available. Certain people that you had as big prospects in 2019 or 2020 don't live up to their full potential. That's always going to happen. But it's more just the case of if you just keep adding more and more bulk to either roster, it just means that if someone is coming in and he's immediately taking a top spot, it means that other people that were heading towards that top spot have to take a back seat.
Mm.
So what does that mean for your Ricky Starks, your Daniel Garcias, your flights, your people that you still have seemingly, at least because you utilised a lot of vested interest in, but has the glass ceiling added another layer to it by bringing Okada in. And the same thing would happen with WWE. WWE it's different because WWE is more of a machine. As Triple H has always said, there's always he tries to treat it as a play, and there's always people to fill certain roles. And so Okada would just come in and, potentially take the role of someone else. But what does that mean for certain people? Like, is that a good thing for someone like an Austin Theory that Okada comes in because it's someone new to work with, or is it just someone else for Austin Theory to lose to in his seemingly endless quest to never get over?
Honestly, I look at Okada in WWE and I see him taking the role of, in terms of schedule, of an Edge, where they wouldn't have him year round. They'd have him quarterly and make him this, okay, you come in and be our top star, that people know you, and it's almost like having that replacement for Edge or that replacement for John or someone who's on the level of Punk. And that's not a bad thing. It's just still always going to mean that this roster, as it sits, is less than.
Well, there's also there's a realistic thing to keep in mind too, that as much as we and a lot of other people would be like, man, it'd be cool to see Okada go up against these people and have these matches. Okada's not going to make or break an entire thing on his own. The vast majority, I would say, of the casual audience from WWE would have almost no idea who he is. The smarky people, the ones that follow stuff would, and they'd be like, oh, this is awesome, Okada's here, this is so cool. But they would have to still re-educate people, and they wouldn't be able to take Okada, for instance, and put him on a you wrestle 5 times a year thing, and we're treating you as the next big thing, and that's it, because you just have the star power immediately. It wouldn't quite translate the same. In AEW, they can do that, but in AEW, the fans want to see these people wrestled all the time. So if they were to just be like, okay, well, they're in here and it's another one of those guys, how many more of those guys are going to be there without it necessarily mattering? Jay White's a fun wrestler to watch, but when Jay White came in, did we see any bump up from the ratings, really? It's another good guy that they have on the roster, and he can win a title at any point, and I'm sure the AEW fans would be cool with it, and he's a good option to put in the Continental Classic and to, pull out for any kind of match. But is that going to take AEW to the next level, or is it just going to add another Claudio to the mix? You know what I mean?
And yeah, I'll at least caveat with this saying Okada deserves to get this
treatment.
Whatever this treatment and whatever this big pay package is going to get, because he's going to earn a lot, whichever way he goes to. And he's been, by all reports at least, grossly underpaid by New Japan. I'm not saying they never paid him well. It's not like he's feeding off scraps or anything like that. But he's, for a guy who, at least to people within the know in the wrestling community, is a bona fide legend, one of the greatest wrestlers to ever live for the particular style that he works. He's not earning anywhere near as much as even some people in the, not even the top names of WWE and AEW, but the people probably on the tier below both of those two, he's probably has never been made that much. So
and I was reading something that said, a lot of it could also have to do with the fact that the yen just falling, and
that's the case with a lot of the Gaijin stars, as I was mentioning. like last week about them saying about their contracts becoming up due, because if they're trying to spend the money in America or the UK or somewhere else,
just doesn't go as far.
Exactly, yeah. So they have to earn more, but New Japan willing to pay that much more, and now they're losing one of their top homegrown stars. Just it just seems like everything is not. I don't say like it's completely falling apart in New Japan, but I mean, we mentioned last year about how difficult a year it was for AEW with a lot of things happening with them and how they're creative and a lot of the direction seems to be muddled. Like New Japan, since the pandemic, have been all over the place, and it's just because we don't cover it as often or as ardently that we probably don't recognize it that much. But they probably make AEW's issues over the past like year and a half or so like pale into insignificance compared to what they're going through both on screen and behind the scenes. And yeah, as I think that there are obvious benefits of having Okada go to either AEW or WWE, interesting matchups, see him personally getting that opportunity, but I think they're also, I'm not saying it'll have a net negative effect, but it will have a negative impact on other people within the WWE and AEW like stratification of things that people will overlook because of how big a star Okada is and how interesting the move is. But it's also one of the benefits of having like this quote unquote wrestling war. It's like you have interesting stories and pickups and contract news regarding this that we never really got with just a single entity monopoly that we previously had. And before we move on as well, I just wanted to I thought this was quite like just a funny little tidbit as well. So on Japanese Twitter, it actually wasn't Okada's name that was trending on Twitter. It was his wife's name that was trending on Twitter, because everyone was kind of concerned that because of this news that she would be moving away from Japan and going to the USA. So clearly it also is just an indication that Okada's a big star for us in the wrestling bubble, but for just the more general Japanese audience, is actually his wife is the bigger star.
Yeah.
It never changes, does it? We can never have a win.
Yeah, so I mean, that might be one of the bigger factors that people aren't paying as much attention to, is just like if his wife is such a big star over there, and if he, of course, wants to stay in Japan, and you know, if AEW, for instance, is more willing to have him just fly out when necessary, and WWE's like, we really need you over here, pal. That could be the deciding factor, even if the money isn't necessarily as good on one end. It's there's a lot to be said about the unknowns that we aren't going to know ever, let alone the things that we don't know right now. And one thing that we can be sure about, essentially, is he's not popping up in the Royal Rumble, because his deal's not over until at least the 31st, if I'm correct, right?
Correct.
So that's like, okay, he's not going to be at the Royal Rumble. For anybody who's thinking like, you know, maybe there's a chance that he pops up as a guest there. I mean, look, crazier things have happened, but it's not happening.
I mean, okay, here's a fun segue. If we are in a position where your current Monday Night Raw World Heavyweight Champion cannot compete at WrestleMania, are you like frantically like, please, we'll do this? Just, we need a big match for Punk. You know, like
that was one of the big things that was in the again being reported by the Observer newsletter, is that the recent quite I guess like more notable push of Shinsuke Nakamura over the last few months was almost WWE sending out a message to a guy like Okada saying, "Hey, we push Japanese guys."
Yeah.
Just like, so Nakamura was basically a pawn in their attempt to sign Okada.
I don't blame them for trying to do something like that, though. I mean, that's got to be, you know, one of the few ways that you can illustrate that on television, because you can't just like have a character come out there and go, "Man, if Okada was here," like, yeah, they can't pull that off.
Shinsuke and Okada, they were Chaos stablemates. And if we had a better set of tag team champions, I thought that was a possibility. I'd be pitching like, okay, cool, Nakamura and Okada against Sammy and Kevin. You know, like just throw out a name. Because I think there is a lot of fun things he could do there. He's one of the few stars from New Japan that I think could actually translate well in the WWE environment.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see how they plan on, wherever he goes, how he pops up. If he's going to just be, you know, we get some Tony Khan announcement that says, hey, we've got a big announcement coming, and then at something like on an episode of Dynamite, he just shows up and it's like, yep, we signed Okada. Or if WWE ends up being able to seal him and they do some kind of press conference thing because I think that's probably what they would do, to try to make it be like, you know, like we got this big signing and we're really excited to have him on the team. I want him to go to WWE for the sense that I know what I would get out of him in AEW, and I'm curious what WWE would do with him. But I expect him to be in AEW. If you had to say like a want and an expectation, whether they're the same or different, where would you guys land? Probably.
I think I expect him in AEW. I think I'd probably say I want him in AEW, just because that'll go a long way in the quote unquote restoring of the feeling. It's just that idea that like AEW was supposed to be the American answer to New Japan, and now you have Mr. New Japan. So that's a really great move.
Obviously, as someone that doesn't watch WWE week to week, I would want and expect him to be in AEW. I was also just mentioning like the Forbidden Door aspect of it as well, which just it is quite crazy that pretty much over the course of the last 2 years they've signed. Well, if they do end up signing a card, they would have signed their biggest Japanese star and then arguably their biggest two Gaijin stars of the last decade as well, in both Will Ospreay and Jay White. So yeah, it's almost to the point of like maybe Forbidden Door is now kind of, how to say, like it's going to lose a lot of its luster, but it's almost a case of, well, Forbidden Door might as well just be an AEW pay-per-view.
I mean, it's kind of already felt like that to me already, just this past year, but yeah, they would argue obviously that that's not the case because the whole point of it's supposed to be that it isn't.
Maybe in order to try and restore that feeling to a degree, they need to invite some other promotions to take part in it.
Yeah, I mean, it like you could classify it as Forbidden Door, but not have the AEW X New Japan thing. It could be just labeled, you know, Forbidden Door. Then you could add whatever the other companies are each year, you know, AEW X, TNA X, MLW, whatever it might be. Yeah, I don't know. I'd still like to see WWE try to do something like that, but I don't think that they're in the mindset that they would ever want to promote another company that much. They would just be like, well, you know, you can come over here and we can use your people and fuck off after that. But
I mean, they've made some baby steps with All Japan Pro Wrestling.
Yeah.
But I'm always quite, and again, I know it's a different regime nowadays, but I'm always so wary about it because usually when WWE starts doing that kind of cross promotion, or at least like making steps towards working with another promotion, that the end goal is to swallow that promotion whole.
Yeah.
So I'd always kind of, until they can prove that they won't do that, I'd rather that no one was doing that with WWE. So
that's definitely somebody to pay attention to. Somebody else that is switching to another company now that is, you know, it's a big deal for the people that follow those companies, and it's, you know, maybe a lesser deal compared to Okada in the grand scheme of things, but Black Taurus is going to be heading to AEW. Maybe not necessarily under the name Black Taurus. Apparently the name is owned by AAA. And the possibility that it could just be some other name or his real name, or they give him a variation of that. He's dark Taurus or he's black Taurus, whatever. I don't know, but the little bit that I've seen of him, I had said before that I liked the match or two that I've seen of him before. I didn't end up seeing his match at the last ROH show since that was the whole big mess, and we covered that before. But as far as bringing him in, I see only a benefit to that. How do you guys see that?
Yeah, I think it's a good move for him. Of course, I think that there's always been a bit of just talking about other companies that are just like creatively in all over the place and quite reckless behind the scenes as well. AAA getting out of that and going to Ring of Honor. Presumably, I assume that it's obviously AEW / Ring of Honor, but I think that he'll most likely be a fixture on Ring of Honor instead. Bigger fish in smaller pond. I thought his match with the Kingo was excellent at the final battle show. I think that he almost, in many ways, outshined the Kingo in that match. He's super talented. He's a big guy, but he moves really quickly. He does plenty of like flips and additional stuff that has the power gain to add a different dimension to him. I think that if he does stick on the Ring of Honor side of things, I don't see him like being consistently pushed towards titles immediately straight away. But I think that he'll have plenty of great matches. For the most part, that's what I'm there for. So yeah, I think this is a good move. I think it's just one of many other ones which won't be announced or won't get the All Elite graphic for a while until they decide that they're going to, put him in a more significant angle. In the same way that I think, and I'm probably not alone in this, that I think that both Brian Keith and Queen Aminata have signed with AEW, but they're just not going to say the All Elite thing until they start winning some matches, because at the moment they're just enhancement talent at the moment.
Which at that point, usually that means that they're not necessarily going to get that All Elite graphic. It'll just be assumed that they're a part of the roster, and one day they'll pop up on the not updated enough the roster page on the AEW website. I've said it before a million times. AEW's got to get their shit together with that. Like the photos page doesn't have a link to it and all. It's nuts. But I expect that you'll just see him show up on Ring of Honor more often and do some, guest spots on like Rampage, Dynamite, Collision, that kind of thing. But if they would want to do the All Elite graphic, they probably would have done it already. Or at least maybe they will once they figure out what his name is going to be. Maybe that's what's holding off a little bit. Maybe they need to like officially purchase the rights to the Black Taurus name, and that way they can say Black Taurus is All Elite, as opposed to, well, we signed the guy that is Black Taurus, but we can't really say that, What do you think about that whole Black Taurus signing, Rob?
It's a good one. It's a good one for ROH in particular. I think Tony has tried to build a nice lucha community there.
A good lucha thing?
And he is kind of building a good lucha thing. And Taurus is a solid hand. I thought he would have ended up in TNA if he was leaving, because he spent most of his time in the States in TNA. That's really interesting. I think it'll be really, really strong for the company. I want Ring of Honor to get its own identity. It took some steps this week because the Ring of Honor Tag Team Champions were actually on the Ring of Honor program. However, Claudio Castagnoli was also on the Ring of Honor program, which just made me mad because he was never there when he was Ring of Honor champion. I really wish that ROH had a bit more of its own thing. I'm glad Tony rescued it, but I'll always feel like I would have preferred it to be its own entity.
So as far as like new signings and stuff, those are the only things that I have on my track record for this. Track record's the wrong term. On record for this thing, but let's pivot over to some other different things we have that aren't related to contracts. Let's talk about this Grayson Waller and LA Knight appearance on the Sunrise talk show in Australia. They're trying to hype up obviously trying to build up interest in getting more sales for Elimination Chamber coming up in February. So they make an appearance on this talk show, a run-of-the-mill type of thing. And we essentially get another Vader and Undertaker situation from back in the day where LA Knight is in the Undertaker spot, Grayson Waller's in the Vader spot. And these talk show hosts are, you would think that they would learn their lesson from history, but they don't care enough to, I guess, pay attention to that stuff. They're doing the whole like, oh, well, it's fake, but hit me with your finisher. And Grayson Waller is, I like how he approached this. He's just like, you are disrespecting this whole business that we're doing. And if you want me to punch you in the face, I'm going to fucking punch you in the face. And you're not going to like it. And then we're going to have a problem. So this isn't some fake thing that I'm just going to not hit you. I'm going to fucking deck you. And they're all like, let's get the cameraman out here and all. I'm very glad, of course, that it didn't come to him actually doing something that he would get in trouble for, some lawsuit or whatever that would blow back on him. But I'm glad that this wasn't just like a bunch of goofs crapping on the thing that they're supposed to promote and then kind of getting away with it,
Yeah, I thought this was very had an old school feel to it. That you had those I can't remember what the hosts.
Yeah,
name was.
I don't remember them back in the day.
But it was the one with the Hulk Hogan choking a guy out.
Richard Belzer. Richard Belzer's.
Yeah, Richard Belzer. Yeah, just going down and claiming all the issues revolving around that. Who was there was another wrestler that attacked a reporter backstage, wasn't it?
David Schultz smacked the shit out of John Stossel.
Yeah. And then there's another one of this one didn't end in violence, but you had a Roddy Piper going hard on
Bill Maher.
Bill Maher, that's right. Where he was just, again being like, that's very disrespectful, and you're making fun of this thing, and I'm here to do your show, and you're crapping on my livelihood. This is stupid.
I don't know why. And first of all, thank God that they did this, because too much of all of it, I think a lot of the problems that stems even in the product is from everybody just being like, it's just a joke, it's not that serious. So it's always nice when I actually take it seriously. And I don't know why people are just constantly like, oh, but it's all a show. Like, you don't go up to, Travolta after Pulp Fiction and be like, can you shoot me? Like, it's not a thing that you do. Like, why is it like, oh, well, since it's all a fucking circus, can you hit me with a stunner? Like, it's weird. All this stuff only happens to wrestlers.
It does all just buy into create the perception that wrestling is, silly. It's, oh, you guys do fake fighting, and why do you watch that stuff? I mean, we deal with it as wrestling fans all the time. People questioning why you watch that stuff, and don't get me wrong, a lot of what we watch is pretty silly.
Oh, it absolutely is.
But at the end of the day, it's still legitimate, like, athletes, like people that work hard, train hard, do a lot of crazy shit in the ring, and
get injured, nowadays, and we'll talk about that in a little bit.
They do like, I would say, like, they hurt each other. They don't intentionally hurt each other. Obviously, it's all choreographed, but it's a case of you're still taking those landings. You're still bumping in the ring. You're still taking those strikes to chest. It's not like they're faking those big chops to the chest or whatever. That's still going to hurt. And yeah, there's a lot of, I'd say everyone, but there's a large amount of people that just think that it's all just, like actors doing stuff on a green screen on a set. It's like, no, these are people putting their bodies on the line for our entertainment, and you probably should show more respect for it. And I have give a lot of credit to Grayson Waller for standing up for it there and putting those guys in their place. He's gone up in mine, hopefully other people's estimations for that.
I'd assume that WWE, since he didn't do anything that would get them in trouble, I'd assume that he got a lot of goodwill sent his way, and earned a lot of brownie points because he did, like, LA Knight was like, like, we're not going to do this. Like, it's enough to not like poke the bear with that. But Waller standing up for that, I could picture Triple H being like, fuck yeah, man. Like, you really represented the company well there by not backing down and looking like an idiot and not going too far and looking like an idiot. You hit the right level of seriousness. And yeah, it's like, when they go on talk shows, somebody goes to like Jimmy Fallon's show and they talk about Robert Downey Jr. is like, oh, I'm not actually wearing the Iron Man suit. And it's like, oh, but let's play a little game. Like, what if you were, let's see if Chris Evans can actually throw a shield like Captain America or whatever. That's a different level of like poking fun at yourself than what happens with pro wrestling. Because pro wrestling's presented as, we know it's fake, like as in scripted, but we're going to play along with it. And we know that you're doing these moves and you're actually potentially getting hurt. If you tell somebody that it's all bullshit and like, hey, do your finisher to me and I'll get up and laugh right after, whatever, that is disrespectful. It's how can you approach it any other way than they're laughing at you and you are a guest on their show. They wanted you to do that show. And you're promoting an event that you want people to do that for. Are you going to ask a singer that's auto-tuned to be like, well, we know that you're auto-tuned, but can you sing without it so we can all hear your awful normal voice? You wouldn't be disrespectful like that. So it's because it's pro wrestling that people have this idea in mind that they can just goof on it. And, well, you're all a bunch of stupid hacks and everything anyway, so it doesn't matter. You're not anybody that we need to actually care about the perception for. And it's just a shame that it's even an issue, but I'm glad that he approached things the way that he did. And I'm assuming that that's going to work out well for him in the future. That maybe if he wouldn't have already been lined up for something big, that'll be the thing that makes them go, yep, okay, he's going to be a guy that we can trust going forward.
Honestly, it put him in a position where even though he just aligned himself with Logan Paul, he could one day fight Logan Paul based on that exact idea of like, I left my home country for this. I left everything for this, and he now has some cred as one of those guys. And I think it's really, really awesome.
So I got another set of things for us to talk about that are all related to each other, unrelated to this. But you brought up Austin Theory. He and Cora Jade and potentially Seth Rollins are injured. Austin Theory, it seems now, after some time has settled from SmackDown, he had this match with Carmelo Hayes, which stopped on a dime when they were trying to do. Was it what's that, a C4 that they were trying to pull off?
Yeah, it was a
Spanish fly.
Top rope Spanish fly. And they landed quite awkwardly, and the match was immediately stopped.
Yeah, it seemed like both of them potentially had gotten a concussion. Now it seems like Carmelo Hayes is fine. He was able to wrestle on NXT this week. Austin Theory, who knows how bad the concussion is, but tonight on SmackDown, maybe we'll get some kind of an indication of that. Maybe it's not as bad as everybody's assuming that it is. Maybe he's able to at least make an appearance, or maybe they've checked him out and he needs to just take some time off or whatever. I'm assuming that it's bad enough that he's not going to be in the Royal Rumble, which is a shame for, he wasn't going to win it, but still.
He should be fine. I would be totally.
Well, they have to test him for everything before they let him do that.
They came back and said that both Mello and Theory had facial contusions, and Mello wrestled. Why wouldn't Theory? Is there something that came out after that said Theory was actually more hurt?
I had only seen things that said that Theory was in the concussion protocol stuff and not Mello.
Because they had said they both checked him out. Well, this is also WWE's official thing that said they checked them both out. And Theory did hit harder, so there is a potential for that. But I was under the impression that they were both okay.
I hope so. I mean, maybe I'm missing out on an extra report about that, but as far as I could find before, I didn't see anything that was like guaranteeing that he was. Maybe I'm just missing out on that, whatever. But if that ends up being the case, I'm sure that derails some of the plans. Not necessarily obvious. It's not like it's Austin Theory's a current champion or something. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Cora Jade, though, I still feel like she had something that she was going to be heading toward going, at the course of WrestleMania and Stand and Deliver and all. She was, she tore her ACL on a live show recently, meaning that she wasn't able to compete in the Battle Royal that happened this past week. Whether or not that changed plans for the Battle Royal, might not ever know, but she was one of my top potential picks to win that. And for her to not be able to do that, and going forward, she's going to be out for a long time. Like I think that the estimate was like 9 months to a full year. Yeah, these ACL tears
said up to a year.
Yeah, these torn ACL thing, which is like, that's the trend. Like everybody's just tearing their ACL. We don't see any kind of injuries for the most part that are like,
isn't it typically the women too?
It seems to be, and a lot of it, on the NXT side of it. So I'm wondering if there's something that they're not paying attention to in like the Performance Center training. Maybe they're like pushing too hard on that, and they're kind of like they're weakening their legs in some way, or like something about the way that they're teaching them is like they're taking falls the wrong way or something. There's been enough instances in a short amount of time that it's kind of concerning to me.
Yeah, and I can only just speculate because I don't know the whole story of this stuff, as none of us do, but it does feel like, especially with the women's side of things, there seems to always be a bit of a desire to do a bit more, to push a little bit harder, to do a lot more, I guess, gymnastic and flippy style moves in matches.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, if you are performing that stuff correctly, or you're doing it repeatedly in especially if you're wrestling multiple times a week or practicing multiple times a week, then yeah, it's going to take a toll on your body a lot sooner. And again, I know this is a generalizing sweeping straight statement. People can come after me if they want to on that, but typically women have like less muscle density than men do. And so if they are taking repeated bumps on different body parts and suffering those kind of bumps and landings, then yeah, the likelihood is that it's going to cause more injuries. I mean, with just from my perspective, as a soccer fan or football fan, that there are a huge number of ACL injuries that female soccer players suffer compared to the men. And it's been like a thing that people have been trying to research and do a lot more information to try and see what they can do in order to prevent this scale of injury happening. And probably the same thing should be happening in a lot of women's sports, because, and it's difficult for wrestling as well, because especially after the explosion in the importance of women's wrestling in the past 5 to 10 years, there's always that trying to, I guess, like break forward and prove that they are at the same level as the men.
Yeah, there's the stigma that they need to try to break, which, let's face it, they still haven't been able to.
No, of course not. But then because people constantly bring it up, and I know people say we try and like, I think it's the mindset of we judge the talent the same, just like men and women. We kind of judge the quality of their character story, but I think we do need to make compensations for the in-ring stuff. And that's not to say the women are worse. They will just be doing things in a different way to the men can.
Yeah, and they can do some things better, and there's some things that as much as you want to be as politically correct as you can be and try to say everything's equal all the time with everything, everything isn't equal, in the same way that, you know, you can't picture Braun Strowman to do the same maneuvers as Dragon Lee. Like, that you cannot approach every person as being on the same equal playing field to do the same stuff at the same capacity, wrestle the same style. So when Becky Lynch has a match, it's going to be different than Rhea Ripley. And when the women have their matches, it's going to be different than the men's matches. And you can't just be like, okay, well, across the board, you need to do everything the same exact way.
And there's a lot of things that the women do that are in many ways superior to the men. I think the women do excellent submission stuff that some of the men can't do because they're not as flexible enough to sell in the way that the women can in certain submission positions. They are good they can be very good at high flying, and they can do some very like dynamic lifts and moves that certain other men can't do. But as I say, if there is that constant pressure or that constant desire to exceed the men, or to feel like they have to overcome the stigma that is always plaguing them, and people continue to like downplay them, or then they're going to want to push themselves harder, and if they push themselves harder, they're more likely to get injured. And so it's just this whole vicious cycle that I don't think there's any real solution to, because the solution is that people stop being dicks on Twitter and stuff like that, but that's never ever gonna that's never gonna happen. So I think that, unfortunately, this is just going to continue until something changes and they find a way to better protect their wrestlers from these types of injuries. Whether that is just more pared back style, and also it's a fallout of what wrestling is today. You probably wouldn't have suffered this. Well, maybe you would have suffered that number of injuries like years ago, because the muscle injuries would come by the taking of steroids and other enhancements. But now it's just a case that people just work a much harder, more intense style than we used to, and we also see people in longer matches than we used to. So it's just a case of, especially on house shows, because that's when you do longer matches, because that's when you practice and you develop your stuff. The TV is where you see the shorter matches because you're just trying to fit into a time queue. Whereas in the house show, that you're not really on the same time pressure. So it's terrible news for Cora Jade. She seemingly was heading towards the NXT Championship and now has another setback to deal with.
Fortunate, because she just came back at Deadline. I almost said Bloodline. At Deadline, and she was about to finally get to that next level, and now she's got this setback. And if I'm honest, when she's ready to go, I just put her on the main roster. At a certain point, that NXT level is just, you can only work in the Florida loop so much. Terrible. It's a terrible injury, and Cal made some great points there about the style and about seeing what you can do to maybe not have this be such a regular occurrence. I think a great example of what working a consistent style like this can do to the body is actually MJF. He didn't wrestle a lot, right? And then the 1 year he wrestles a pretty regular schedule, regular, not even by WWE's old standards, regular by modern AEW standards, he ends the year a complete mess with the torn labrum and other injuries. So
it's weird because we're in a time frame where people are healthier than they've ever been in pro wrestling, arguably, and yet because the style has been so demanding, you're running into more of the problems where, certain people in the past, they wrestle a style where they're not landing as much and they're not jumping around and, killing their knees. And we've talked about it a million times too, with the idea that, like, can everybody stop doing suicide dives? If you are nearly hurting yourself every time that you're doing it, it's not worth it. And maybe you don't need to land so damn hard on your legs all the time just to make it seem a little bit more impactful. And I'd rather somebody put out 75% of the same type of match and be able to wrestle for the whole year than to do 2 matches at 100% and be done for, 8 months.
I completely agree. And I'd like to see a shift towards more of a classic, fast-paced TV style where even in the great matches that we see on Dynamite and Impact and all that, sometimes I just don't want to see a match go through 3 commercial breaks when I'm watching Monday Night Raw.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, sometimes, if anything, it's like, oh my God, can this match just fucking end?
It's like, yo, you can have a good 6-minute match and then get more people on the show to maybe justify the fact that you have 3 hours, but I don't want to get on that soapbox again. Heartbreaking for Cora Jade, and heartbreaking that's not the only injury we have to talk about.
So I was expecting Cora Jade to potentially win that title at Stand and Deliver, and I mean we might as well just talk about it now. The winner of the Battle Royal for this past week, which was a pretty interesting Battle Royal. I don't think that they necessarily should have been calling it on the website Innovative Battle Royal, which is like you're patting yourself on the back for something that's already existed. Like New Japan does it every single year with the Rambo.
No, they don't immediately do the Fatal 4-Way, and WWE hasn't done this. So they can get away with it. It's still WWE. They can still suck their own. You know what I mean?
I just think it's pretty sad to be like Innovative Battle Royal. Like you might as well say like super awesome, totally the best ladder match coming up or something. But that ended up being a good spotlight for a couple different people. Maddie Ronkowski had popped up. She is Ren
Sinclair.
Ren Sinclair. Not a name I would have picked out of a hat, but yeah, cool.
Had a hell of a run too, and I think this is important because I just mentioned WWE lying. WWE did this weird thing that they don't do in the modern era because you can't, where they basically said, yeah, by the way, Ren Sinclair, as a result of Cora Jade's injury, beat Cora Jade in the match, and now she's taking her place in the Battle Royal, where it was reported everywhere Cora got injured wrestling Lyra. But Ren Sinclair is now in the Battle Royal. She had a great showing. She's a great talent. She's a former NWA Women's Tag Team Champion. She's got years under her belt that some of the women in NXT probably don't have. I thought it was really cool for her, and she lasted till the Final 5.
Yeah, Final 5 is a really good indication that they are approaching her as somebody that they want to build in the future, as opposed
approaching
to
her as somebody who needs to fill the void of she can wrestle, and we need one that can wrestle right now.
But I mean, like they treated her immediately as more of a big deal than some of the other people that have, recently been like working their way through the system. Like, Izzy Dame, for instance, has been doing quite a bit more now. She's been paired with Kiana James, but a handful of other talent. I haven't seen anything really happening from like, Danny Palmer hasn't done much in a while.
Didn't she also get hurt?
I don't think that she was hurt. She might be, maybe now. I don't know. I haven't seen Amari Miller in God knows how long.
She just came back from injury and has been working Level Up.
Oh, okay, good. Well, good that she's back. I mean, not that she was injured. Jakar Jackson, I think, was back from injury this time. They seem like they're a little cold on not doing as much with Carmen Petrovic. She had like a couple weeks there where she was like focal point. I haven't seen Valentina Feroz in a while. I don't know if she's injured or not. Vendy Chu's still injured, I guess. CV Turner's probably still injured. But good showing for Ren Sinclair. They ended up having some spots for a lot of people in here. Ariana Grace had a little spot going on. Fallon Henley, one of the final 4. Kehlani Jordan pulled a Kofi Kingston. She got a little bit of a nod in that way. That was pretty neat.
She's really good.
Yeah, I like her. And they went with Roxanne Perez, which I was thinking could have been a potential for Stand and Deliver, but they're going to turn her heel. And it's not gonna.
She's
It's
doing
not
the
gonna
Bob
work.
Backlund right now. She's like, "Oh, you think I'm so nice? I'm not gonna let go of this crossface that I have on you." Honestly, if you're not gonna fucking move her up, put the belt on her. She never lost the belt the last. Actually, there goes again the Bob Backlund. Probably what Sean's doing. She never lost the belt. She passed out because she has anxiety, and then gleefully watched Indy Hartwell grab it at Stand and Deliver. She never lost. So maybe this is a way to get it back on her.
I don't know exactly what their plans were necessarily, and they've been bouncing around quite a bit with like the North American title and all. But I don't imagine all this has been working out the way that they thought that it was going to. But yeah, I mean, if that's something that Cora Jade was going to be a part of, you got to pivot eventually.
I can see a world where maybe they wanted to do Cora and Roxanne.
Yeah.
At Stand and Deliver.
I think that might have been one of the plans. If not, like maybe a triple threat. Still think it's going to be a triple threat for Dragunov and Trick and Mello. Mello and Trick, continuing that story this week with the whole idea that Vengeance Day is going to be Trick versus Dragunov, and Mello wants Trick to focus on the tag title situation with the tournament finals being at that. It's going to be Trick and Mello against Baron Corbin and Braun Breaker. The Wolf Dogs were somewhat given the moniker of. A lot of these things that are happening in NXT right now are kind of feels like they're in a transitional phase. Like Von Wagner now wants to go after the Heritage Cup. Josh Briggs was wanting to go after that, but now Josh Briggs has JBL trying to promote him. So maybe they just decided to switch up a little bit. Oba Femi is heel. He's going to seemingly fight Dragon Lee at Vengeance Day. JC Jane wasn't.
Oba Femi was the Nigerian prince that we've all been, so told was going to come and give us all this money.
He broke out.
I want to bring up a point about that as well. You probably won't recall, but back in our awards for the WWE that we did at the end of the year, check that out by the way. Check both the AEW and WWE ones if you haven't done so already. You made a proclamation that you didn't think that anyone who was part of WWE's Next in Line program was going to do anything significant by the end of 2024.
Yep.
and I decided to go the complete opposite prediction and say that somebody would be a champion by the end of 2024.
and I also
literally
like to say,
2 weeks later, it all comes up Callum House.
I just want to say, who was my one to watch? Oba Femi. It took me like 4 days.
I obviously not on the winning side of those things, but I'm totally down to be wrong when some good things are happening, and I'm interested to see what happens in the future with Oba Femi. But
I'm disappointed that he's heel though, because he's like, people were vibing with him. So to hear that he's heel kind of sucks, but I get what they're doing. He doesn't want to do the open challenges, nor should he. He's a giant. But he'll probably defeat Dragon Lee at the Vengeance Day and then continue being a dominant champion until giving the belt to someone new.
Who I think at this point, my current prediction is that that's what Josh Briggs is going to end up doing. Because he's another big dude.
That's something we haven't really seen for the North American title. There's like a standard Haas battle with the exception of Lee and Dijak, and even that was 5 years ago. I think this would be really exciting. And I like, if you're going to put JBL with somebody, Josh Briggs makes sense. He's a big dude, former tag team guy. This could work better than the Baron Corbin thing. Baron Corbin and Braun Breaker, by the way, I enjoy watching them.
I kind of like it, yeah.
I think it was a little too cutesy with the whole, yeah, man, so I was thinking about us in the shower, and it's just like, wait, what? But I think that this might be the best thing Baron Corbin has done consistently. And shit, if it's another tag team for the main roster and a way to get the new Steiner on TV, I'm all for it.
Hopefully a way to get Rex Steiner. I still want them to change that name. But yeah, they're not going to at this point. But the other stuff from NXT, you know, most of it was just sort of, you know, whatever. The only other thing that really stood out to me was Lola Vice and Elektra Lopez breaking up.
Yeah.
Because why?
Is Lola a babyface now, Danny?
I already got a message about that before. I got a message about that, and I got who was the other one where it was like, is this person a heel or something along those lines?
Are they a heel because they didn't they didn't count to 3 years? It's a very silly message. I also saw it. Why did they have Lola Vice turn on Elektra Lopez here?
I don't know. Like some of these things make perfect sense. Like we talked before about Eddie Thorpe and Trey Bear Hill potentially being a tag team. And it's like, oh, cool. All right. You're heading in the most obvious direction. Jasmine Nix is a thing in this JC Jane story. Sure. Whatever's happening there. Well, I'll follow that story. The Lola Vice and Elektra Lopez thing doesn't make any sense because she's never even used that breakout tournament thing. So it's not like she had a shot. Elektra Lopez cost her it. And then because she lost her chance to win the title, Lola Vice is mad and she turns. It was just like, well, let's have a tag match and then fuck you, I don't like you. What?
Well, no, it was that, like, I get they do this constantly in Battle Royals where one will turn on the other. We just watched the 2014 Rumble where Dean tries to throw out Roman and Roman throws both Dean and Seth out. But this didn't make any sense because you should have at least had it established that Elektra Lopez really wanted the tag title shot, unless they're going with, Lola's not a heel, she's a babyface. And she saw that Elektra trying to use her. Because if not, then what are you doing here?
And I'd like to say that I would assume that they're going to follow up on this next week and really make sense of it all, but I kind of have a feeling that they're just going to end up being like, this is what happened and we're going to have a match between them or something along those lines. But we talked about these injuries, you know, the Cora Jade thing and all. We got to go back to Monday Night Raw and talk about a way bigger story with that. Yeah, some stuff happened on Raw that I don't think we really need to break down. There was a lot of filler this week with tag matches.
There was another match that just stopped, didn't it? Or was that was last week with the Fabian Eichner thing?
That was like 3 weeks ago or something, right?
Oh, that was last week. Oh no, fuck.
Yeah, it was a little while ago.
Time was a flat circle, but yeah, with Vinci being called off. But Gunther returned, said he was in the Rumble. I think this is setting up Gunther and Lesnar.
So do
we'll
I.
Talk more about that next week.
Technically, a match did end sort of out of nowhere with Xavier Woods throwing a chair at Ludwig Kaiser, but that was the plan. So it wasn't like that was an injury.
I strongly hope this is leading to Big E and Kofi being Royal Rumble ready.
I hope so. But the big thing that did happen is we had the Jinder Mahal and Seth Rollins match for the World Heavyweight Championship that a lot of people were convinced Jinder was going to win. I don't really know why. That was like such a big, like, it's going to happen thing. I had said before, I think all we're getting is Seth Rollins retaining and doing some kind of a tease of a cash-in that doesn't end up happening, and that's what we got. But we also got, unfortunately, an injury to Seth Rollins that seemingly right now could be a torn MCL.
Yep. Fightful Sean Ross Sapp has reported that the word from WWE and sources near Rollins is that he suffered a torn MCL and a partially torn meniscus. However, it is not known as of yet if he will require surgery. Though the hope is that he can avoid it, they're not sure how they're going to play it out on TV.
Now,
I hate this.
If he's able to wrestle after having, you know, some rehab and to not need surgery and to not be like, you know, out of it. If he's able to wrestle at WrestleMania, At this point, it's fucking January 19th. WWE has spent an entire year plus just saying, fuck most of these people. Like Rhea Ripley, she defended her title half as many times as she should have. Roman Reigns has defended, or let's put it this way, Roman Reigns has appeared an 8th or a 10th as many times as he should have, let alone wrestled and whatever, and clearly is not going to wrestle anymore. He's going to wrestle at the Royal Rumble in a limited capacity because the other 3 are going to do the majority of the match, and then he'll wrestle at WrestleMania. So we're going to spend 4 months and have 2 matches with Roman Reigns and like 4 or 5 appearances where they just cut the promos. Just keep Seth out there as, you know, not wrestling and let him rehab it and do the CM Punk match. I don't want any like, man, he can wrestle, but you know, we don't really want to have somebody not wrestle in the meantime. Hypocritical approach, because you're fine with having that with Roman. And then transition over and it's like, well, CM Punk against like Drew McIntyre or CM Punk against anybody really. I don't want the Cody Rhodes CM Punk match because Cody can't win that title because it's not going to mean the same. And if he loses again, he's just being set up to lose to CM Punk. I don't want to see that. I want Cody to be, you know, to stay at the top and everything. And there's nobody that has as good of a story with Punk as Rollins right now. So if you put anybody else in that position and you give the title to like, I guess it would probably be Drew, and it's just Drew McIntyre wins and now he's the champion. CM Punk wins to Royal Rumble and he goes, you know what, Drew, you had some bad words to say about me as well, and I'm going to challenge you. Yeah, on paper it's a match, but my enthusiasm level is considerably lower. Now, of course, if Rollins needs surgery and he can't do that, then you're screwed. You can't just say don't wrestle and you can, you know, wrestle WrestleMania. But I'm hoping that he can, because even if I don't think that that match is good, that's at least the marquee one that they were building up. And I don't want a WrestleMania 32 situation where you spend that time building some stuff up and then you go, at the last minute we can't. But we'll come back to it eventually. I don't want to fucking see that next year at WrestleMania and spend the whole time waiting for that shit again.
No, that's SummerSlam. Like, if it happens, that's SummerSlam. I don't feel too comfortable making predictions until they say what he needs, but I think we just completely pivot. And I think I've said this before. Yeah, it's a pipe dream, but we could end up seeing Austin headline one night of Mania and The Rock headline the other. And as far as the world title, make it Drew and Sammy and give Sammy the belt. Who cares? Not who cares. I think Sammy deserves the moment. But like, I'm not as worried about the world heavyweight title. It's not like what Roman has. You know what I mean? I think there's plenty of ways to do it. You could do Sammy and Punk for all I care. You know what I mean? Like that would be a great match with you guys with somewhat opposing ideals. And I think you can make a lot of money with it. This thing with Seth sucks because his whole shtick has been, I'm a fighting champion, to the point where if he ends up having to just sit out on the sideline so we can get to the Punk match, it's not going to feel the same. I think there's a good chance that Priest cashes in on Monday and we figure out where we're going from there.
I could see that being a temporary option. That's
what the Money in the Bank is used for. It's the get out of jail free card.
Like they have like Rollins come out and say like, you know, I'm a little banged up and whatever, but I'm going to do everything I can to keep fighting here. And, you know, I'm going to make it to Mania and blah, blah. And then Priest comes out, cashes in. And then that gives, you know, a few weeks or so for Rollins to take some time off and not necessarily be traveling and all. I think it'd be, I don't want this to happen. I'm putting this out there for anybody who thinks that this is what I want. Because what I want is Rollins to be fine and to just go along with the story and for Cody Rhodes to win the title from Roman Reigns and main event and all that other kind of stuff. But if you're in a circumstance where Rollins needs to vacate the title, I think it'd be hilarious if Adam Pearce is out there and he's like, you know, unfortunately you have to vacate the title, whatever, he hands it over and he's like, so over the course of the next couple weeks, we are going to have, and then Damian Priest comes out and Damian Priest goes, I want to cash in my briefcase now. And it's like, well, there's no champion. And he's like, yeah, I know. And then they just go, well, by default, you're the champion. It would be a first time ever that somebody would cash in on vacant. And I think that that'd be hilarious to do. But then again, I don't want to see Damian Priest versus CM Punk as the WrestleMania main event for night one. Even though I like Damian Priest and I hope he wins the title, it doesn't work the same for me. So I also don't want to see Damian Priest win the title and then just lose it right before Mania and then have nothing to do if they don't have anything necessarily planned. They can't predict this stuff. And of course, some things are just like they've been dealt a bad hand. But it really makes me, again, go back to a thing that I've said before with WWE. Stop making people that are injured work like crazy and stop having people that aren't injured sit out and do nothing. And then you won't be in a situation where Seth Rollins has been quote unquote banged up for like 8 months and you're right before WrestleMania and then something like this happens. Why was Cora Jade sitting out as long as she was just to come back and do this? Why didn't they have her appear weeks prior to deadline? Did she need to come back at deadline? Nothing in the story dictated that. They just sat on her ass about that. I hate that situation. If they end up having a situation where Rollins needs to vacate the title, what are you thinking they're going to do, Callum?
If he has to vacate the title, I don't know what necessarily they would do, but if it was up to me, I'd have Damian Priest catch in on this episode of Raw, beat Seth Rollins, you get your little like moments. Like Rollins would be like healthy enough to take a bump, so I'm sure he'd be willing to take the fall for Priest to become the world champion. I would then have Sami Zayn beat him in Elimination Chamber. And then I would have Sami Zayn versus CM Punk at WrestleMania.
Right, cool. Yeah, so like I'm also thinking at
and
this point,
I would
go ahead.
I would either have Sami Zayn beat CM Punk or I would have CM Punk win by turning heel.
That is the right call.
So you'd go from Rollins to Priest to Sammy and then stick with Sammy over the course of how quick of a time frame? What was it?
Well, between now and WrestleMania.
Well, I mean, like, would you have like, so Priest would win this week.
Priest would win this week, and then he would go through, well, I don't know what would happen at Royal Rumble, but so yeah, he would drop it in early March at Elimination Chamber.
The end of February.
End of February. Well, yeah, so he'd hold it for about a month.
Would you have him lose in a match against Sammy, or would you have him defend it in the Elimination Chamber and lose in the Elimination Chamber? Like the belt's on the line, and it's like Priest, Sammy.
I think it'd be quite cool to have him lose it in the Elimination Chamber. I actually think it'd be extra funny to have him lose in. Well, I say funny, but it'd be good to lose it in the Elimination Chamber after being pinned by Finn Balor.
That was just about to go there.
Because then you get his match. Then he has a match at WrestleMania because he has a match with Finn Balor at WrestleMania.
And in the meantime, maybe Priest gives up his tag title to like Dom to be like, all right, you two focus on that or whatever. And then that leads to they drop the belts on. I think that they lose the tag titles beforehand, or they're the tag team champions when the Elimination Chamber thing happens. Then
like Balor, they don't immediately break up. It's just a case of Balor spotted an opportunity and took it to win, and they're just kind of, hey, we're still teammates, we're still on the same page. I needed to, it was every man for himself in that thing, and then they lose the tag titles on the road to WrestleMania to DIY or something.
Then DIY versus Creed Brothers.
Or something like that.
Or
some
Alpha Academy, whatever, Imperium New Day,
And see, then at that point, you have Sami Zayn as world champion defending against, which is a cool moment when he could have won it last year at Elimination Chamber. He wins it the following year, Elimination Chamber on a big show, gets to go into WrestleMania as world champion. It's like the Eddie Guerrero effect. And then, and then on the other side of things, you have, Damian Priest is in a marquee WrestleMania match against Finn Balor, and then you also have the tag team titles on another team that can defend it at WrestleMania as well. So pretty much it resolves all areas, really. The alternative being that if Rollins is healthy again by the time Elimination Chamber comes around, then he could win it in the Elimination Chamber again, and then you just revert back to the story.
Just have him be the last person in the chamber. Yeah, so that way you mitigate the potential of another re-aggravating the injury.
Yeah, but you still tell the same story beats. I think now is the benefit of having a non-cashed in Money in the Bank. You've got that ability now that you wouldn't have necessarily had if you'd made a knee-jerk decision several weeks or months earlier. So I'd say now's the time to utilize it to a good effect. I'd say Priest could eventually one day be a more sustainable world champion, but I'd say you look at what Edge did. When Edge first cashed in, he lost it 3 weeks later. Then he became a main event guy afterwards. So if Priest just has his first reign, he's only a month long, but he then gets over off a feud with Finn Balor in the breakup of the Judgment Day, and then can go on a run towards a more sustainable world title reign in the future, or more sustainable like mid-card title reign in the future, then he, in the long run, benefits.
I mean, we aren't going to know, of course, like they're not going to say anything tonight on SmackDown. We pretty much know that. They are going to show probably footage of that and be like, this is the title was defended on Raw. Oh my God, like you should be checking out Raw because there's going to be some kind of an indication of what's happening with Rollins, and try to build people to, tune into the next episode just for that purpose. But they're not going to have Rollins address it tonight. They're going to have that on Monday. If that ends up being a title change, I mean, they're going to have to address it in some fashion. So we're going to have to talk about that next week a little bit. But I'm hoping that he's just fine and that we can, stay the course and all. That's the breakdown that I had going on outside of the trios titles changing hands on Dynamite, which that wasn't the topic I planned on ending, but I forgot to address that earlier in any other kind of transition.
I mean, like, the Seth Rollins stuff was the more important stuff, but Dynamite did have the ROH 6-man tag titles change hands. Hook had a great showing with Samoa Joe. I thought that was tremendous. Jericho seemed to tease a death match with Kashta. Okay. And it was a great episode. I think it would have been one more worth talking about if not for all of the other gigantic stories that hit.
Yeah, I still think it's still worth talking about in the sense that there was a lot of really good matches. The Christian Cage Dustin Rhodes was amazing. I saw the interesting stat that they are, as a combined age, they're only 2 years younger than the combined ages of Goldberg and Undertaker when they had their match in Saudi.
Huh.
In fact, they are able to deliver a much better match than that one is a testament to their longevity and just their wrestling fundamentals. But the title change was good. It's nice to get to Jay White his first Ring of Honor / AEW gold. I do have to admit that I found the Tony Storm stuff on AEW pretty funny. this this week.
I skipped that.
saying
I
that
didn't
she,
even bother to see it.
she said she was going to sock Deonna Purrazzo right in her box.
Yeah, she definitely said right in her box.
Yeah, so that's that would be an interesting spot if it happened. Might have to make the
Tony,
awards
any
at the end of
interest
the
in
year.
AEW after hearing that?
Not as much. So maybe I will see some future box socking if they put the clip on YouTube.
But I think obviously we could talk about the Hook and Smojo, which was just a great 10-minute match and was a real kind of that's about as good as a 10-minute match you're ever going to get for this for the World Championship. So kudos to both of them for putting it together. But I think the most interesting thing out of the entire show for me was the Young Bucks interview.
The God-given names and all that.
Yeah, so the God-given names, and now because I remember hearing someone talk about it, but I think that it bears repeating here about this whole. Loads of people would always get a bit of a hissy fit about the Young Bucks because feeling like they would use their status as EVPs to hold certain talent down and give themselves prominent positions, when realistically they did anything but. They spent a lot of time in AEW putting a load of teams over when they realistically could have positioned themselves a lot higher because of how good they are. But now they seem to be leaning into this EVP thing and going on a crusade of ridding AEW of some of the has-been superstars that have infiltrated it, which is an interesting long-term story for them, because it's going to seemingly start with Sting and Darby Allin, but it's going to presumably continue past that point, and it'll be interesting to see what sort of names they have on their hit list as part of that. But I also think that something that might have gone a bit under the radar was there was a video package where Sting and Darby Allin said that they're going after the tag titles.
Didn't go under my radar. I started screaming because it's what I've been pitching since they announced this whole thing.
So I think on an episode of Dynamite or Collision between now and Revolution, they're going to beat Ricky Starks and Big Bill to become the tag champions, and then they'll lose the titles to the Young Bucks at Revolution.
I like it. I think it's a great. I'm not thrilled with the presentation of it, but I think it's a fun way to get them in the ring with Edge and Christian. I think it's a fun way to get them back in the ring with the Hardys. I think it's a fun way to really get them to wrestle these different names that they haven't yet. And it puts them back on TV. And quite frankly, the one thing that's been missing from all Elite Wrestling the past couple of weeks has been the Elite. So, or that.
Also, and again, this is a weird note to kind of end on, but I think it's just like a funny little observation. Amazing diversity of mustaches in AEW.
Oh, yeah. Roderick Strong has like a half stash, and Hanger it's just growing this manly mustache, it seems. And it works for him, I think. And
he's very, very Magnum TA now.
And then there's Inspector Cusco with the Bucks. And I like it. I don't know why the stash is in 2024, but I guess here we are.
It shouldn't be. People look stupid. Knock it off. Shave. I say that as somebody who tried to rock a stash at one point in my life and fully regrets it. So, I mean, any other stories that we didn't necessarily talk about, remind us about it in the comments. We will continue that on, and, we'll carry things over into next week. I do want to update everybody that I did, in fact, put up the Royal Rumble predictions contest. So you can see at least on YouTube, if you're looking right now, you can see the link to the form. You can find the form naturally, of course, on the sidebar of smarkoutmoment.com. If you go to the, normal Royal Rumble pages and stuff, you can find it there too. This is all bragging rights for everybody else that's participating on this, but this is going to factor into the fantasy league stuff. So when we predict our side of it, that's going to be a more intense version of how we normally do our pay-per-view predictions. But next week we'll get into the Royal Rumble pay-per-view point stuff that we would normally do. talk about all the match winners and our general ideas of, who's going to be in the final four, who could be the Iron Man, the Iron Woman, who's going to get the most eliminations, who's going to be eliminated the fastest, and potentially even who number 1 to 30 will be for those matches and all. So stay tuned for that stuff coming your way. Of course, stay tuned to everything else that is going on smarkoutmoment.com and fanboysanonymous.com. And the other things that you can find on the link tree on amangotree.com or anthonymango.com, both the same. Go and follow all those accounts, including my personal Twitter, Facebook, and so on. I'm still not going to change the Twitter thing to the X logo all over the place because screw it, I don't want to. But it's going to be Twitter forever for me. So that stuff is at Tony Mango. And if you are over there on Twitter following me, you should also follow Robin Callum too.
Yep, follow me everywhere at Dude Felice and check out my work on Fightful.com as well. Callum?
You can find me on Twitter at Wigmeister14. Check out the Power Rankings every Saturday where I rank the WWE Superstars. And you can also check out the Fantasy League, as we mentioned before, which will have some impact from the Royal Rumble predictions. And we'll see how many points the people are getting because the Royal Rumble is always a big point swinger because of the Royal Rumble matches themselves. So check all that out and see, see how he continues to progress towards WrestleMania.
Okie dokie, everybody. That means we're done. Episode 633. We want to thank you for joining us for this, and we want to thank you in advance for checking out next week's content. We're going back and checking out the previous stuff. We will see you when we see you. Adios for now. This has been another Smark Out moment, and we are being counted out.